Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vice Chief of Defence Staff, Canadian Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Alain Perron.
Thank you. Good evening, Excellencies, Member of the Atlantic Council, Mesdames et Messieurs. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Admiral Michel Howard as the recipient of the Atlantic Council Distinguished Military Leadership Award. There's no doubt a number of you are wondering, how is it that a French Canadian is up here introducing an American four-star admiral for the Award of Distinguished Military Leadership? Well, I've had the honor to serve as Admiral Howard's Deputy Commander of NATO's Joint Force Command Naples over the past year before taking up my new post, which allows me to authoritatively say that I can think of no better recipient for this distinguished award. However, the fact that I'm up here as Canada's Vice Chief of Defence Staff is also indicative of the strong and important relationship that our nations have, as well as the value in broader shared interests and objectives that define the wider NATO alliance. It's perhaps in this context that Admiral Howard distinguishes herself as a truly great military leader. Most, if not all of you know, of course, that there are an extraordinary number of firsts she has achieved in her military career, and that she has thankfully broken through, as well as arguably broken down, a number of barriers. To do this, in and of itself, is laudable, but a true mark has been to lead others on this journey. Achieving the rank of four-star in the U.S. Navy and commanding U.S. Naval Forces Europe, U.S. Naval Forces Africa, and NATO's Joint Forces Command Naples concurrently is illustrative that she can command, lead, and navigate through the labyrinth of complexity that defines our contemporary military environment on top of breaking down barriers. Thank you. If one asks how she has been so successful in commanding concurrently both nationally, multinationally, as well as being a trailbreaker, I would say there are three defining aspects. First, her determination to drive her commands forward and her ability to drive through ceilings. Secondly, her vision to see what is possible, even when many of us see what's in front of us as being insurmountable. And lastly, a recognition and advocacy of collective efforts where the sums are greater than the parts. Certainly, this underpins NATO. Again, it's my pleasure and utmost honor to introduce Admiral Michel Howard as the recipient of this year's Atlantic Council Distinguished Military Leadership Award.
Well, first of all, I need to thank the Atlantic Council for this recognition. I appreciate the work you do to promote education and engagement on the complex security challenges the transatlantic community faces. The platform that you provide allows for a free flow of ideas, and I am truly honored to receive your Military Leadership Award. And I would also like to congratulate the other awardees. I have to especially congratulate Secretary General Stoltenberg because, quite simply, he is my boss. So I want to thank you, Alain, Lieutenant General Parent, for the kind introduction. I know you are very busy with your new position as Canada's Vice Chief of Defense Staff, and I appreciate you making the effort to be with me this evening. It means a lot to me. The enduring relationship that we have forged over the years is indicative of the cooperation between the United States and Canada that we share as neighbors, but also as members of the NATO alliance. And it's very fitting to be here with this distinguished group of individuals tonight, hosted by the Atlantic Council. On this very night, 73 years ago, it was the armed forces of Canada and America, along with those of 9 European countries and Australia, who prepared to assault the beaches of Normandy. June 6, 1944, would be the beginning of the end of World War II. The terrible destruction of that war led political leaders to search for ways to ensure peace and security and to prevent future conflict. And seeking to formalize the alliances that had endured during the war, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was born. And the United States, along with 11 other nations, signed the Washington Treaty to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of their peoples. So Articles 4 and 5 have been considered the bedrock of the alliance, and they provide for the common defense of the members. And the territorial integrity and security of alliance members has been maintained since the signing in 1949. And in the 68-year history of the alliance, Article 5 has only been invoked once. The Allies decided to invoke it for the first time in NATO's history the day after the attacks in this country on September 11th. And the Allies responded resoundingly to that call. NATO formally took over operations in 2003 in Afghanistan and continues to train and advise Afghan security forces with Operation Resolute Support today. So the attacks of September 11th have brought to the fore the new security challenges that confront NATO and the rest of the world. And nearly 7 decades after its inception, the cohesion of a 29-member alliance has been maintained. And the security challenges since 1949 have evolved, but the alliance's willingness to confront these challenges has been steadfast. And yet those challenges still do evolve. And during the Warsaw Summit, NATO leaders realized that many of the challenges in the alliance are emanating from the Mediterranean: violent extremists, failed governments, mass migration. All of these have the potential to destabilize the transatlantic community. But the treaty founders had the wisdom to understand that the world would change, and the alliance had to be able to change with it. The response for the current challenges from the South may not require an Article 4 or an Article 5, but they may be better suited to Article 2, which requires the parties to contribute toward the further development of peaceful international relations by promoting conditions of stability and well-being. NATO many years ago recognized the partnership activity was important to the transatlantic community, and in recognizing partners in Middle East and North Africa who have to play a critical role, the Alliance's Mediterranean Dialogue was created to provide a venue for NATO to work with partners in Algeria, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Mauritania, Morocco, and Tunisia. But partnership itself may not provide enough insight into what's happening in the South. Fragile governments coupled with the actions of illicit actors are allowing these challenges to grow in scope, and the Alliance is working to provide credible answers to these current security questions. But we need to understand the environment. And my command, Joint Force Command Naples, we've been tasked to get an understanding of the political, economic, social, and military challenges in this flank to the south. We are standing up a hub, a center at my headquarters that will focus on gathering and sharing information across a broad spectrum of partners to include private organizations, national institutions, and non-governmental organizations. The more data we collect, collate, and analyze, that means we can start the journey to predict and prepare rather than react and rebuild. So the hub will be an important step to increase our knowledge in Middle East and North Africa. And when it stands up in September, our goal will be to add value to the work already being done by NATO and our partners such as the European Union and the African Union. And ideally, partners in law enforcement and other agencies will also feed into the hub and benefit from the analysis of information. So thank you again to the Atlantic Council for your role in informing the public of the challenges that face our transatlantic community. And thank you for your support to the Alliance and your dedication. And thank you for your global leadership. And I also appreciate, once again, this award, which I accept on behalf of the men and women who serve under me in my United States Command, but for tonight, for the men and women who serve under me in NATO. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vice Chair of the Atlantic Council, C. Boyden Gray.
I want to emphasize with as much clarity as I can that this is not for me. It is a great honor for me to be able to introduce Vice President Pence. This is a first for the Atlantic Council, the first sitting Vice President to appear, so it's a real excitement and honor for all of us. You might wonder, how did it all start? Well, I'm a lawyer, so naturally I think it's fine that he started out as a lawyer for all of you generals and admirals and diplomats in the audience. He then went to the House of Representatives, rocked to the leadership of the House in about 5 terms, became governor of Indiana, where he managed major tax cuts, launched a major infrastructure reform, a lot of education reform, job training reform, all within a balanced budget. Then he became vice president. And so you might say, well, what has he done of note? And again, perhaps because he's a lawyer, he was deeply involved in the confirmation of our new justice on the Supreme Court. Whatever you might think of the views and the philosophy of that justice, I think you all have to admit that it was one of the most dignified, if not the most dignified, confirmation process, certainly in recent memory. But you'll be relieved to know he didn't come here to talk about the law. I think he has a different message, so I'd like to introduce and welcome the Vice President of the United States.
So great for you to be here. Congressman Trump, right there, right here.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ambassador Gray, for that kind introduction. It truly is an honor to be with you tonight as the Atlantic Council celebrates so many distinguished leaders from North America and Europe.